Hey everybody, feeper here hitting you with another video. We're going to continue our guide for the feast for tanks, and we're going to take a more in-depth look at the Paladin here. So let's kind of jump right in. We'll start with the main 3-hit combo that you have. You have Fast Blade, Riot Blade, and then Royal Authority. It's pretty standard stuff to anyone who's played Paladin in PvE. Now Fast Blade hits for a potency of 1000, Riot Blade for 1200 and restores 1000 MP, and then Royal Authority for a potency of 1400. Note that all of these do increase your oath gauge by 5. Now, upon hitting your Gap Closer Intervene, which has a 600 potency and has a 30-second recast, it gives you 3 stacks of Sword Oath, lasts for 10 seconds, and it allows you to cast Atonement, which is just the same as Royal Authority, except it also gives you 500 mana. So, 1400 potency, 500 mana, generates 5 oath gauge. So next up, we have Holy Spirit and Holy Circle. Holy Spirit gives you 10 oath gauge, has a potency of 1500, 1.5 second cast, costs 2500 mana, and also heals you for 100% of the mana, or the damage that you do. So you can see here, when I cast this, I do 1427, I heal for 1427. Now note that you do have a cap of 10,000 mana in PvP. You can only cast 4 of these right off the bat. Now Holy Circle has a potency of 1000 and heals you for 50% of the damage done. Same mana cost, same oath gauge generation, same cast time. So obviously, if you're going to hit more than one person, it's better to use Holy Spirit, or Holy Circle, excuse me, than Holy Spirit, unless you're trying to burst one person out specifically. Now this might sound kind of silly, but just do keep in mind that Holy Circle casts where you are, and Holy Spirit casts on your target. Sometimes in the heat of battle, it can get a little... that can get lost, and you cast a Holy Circle thinking it's going to cast on them, and then you just end up casting it on no one, and you're like, well, that was a complete waste of time. So just keep that in mind. Next up, we should probably talk about Requiescat. So in PvP, you actually, Requiescat is the opposite of how it is in PvE. So in PvE, it increases as your mana increases, the damage of it, but in PvP, it's actually the opposite. So before I go into the kind of the combo, we'll talk about what it does. 30-second recast, 1000 potency, but as your MP decreases, it increases in potency up to 200%. It then gives you a buff for 6 seconds, which reduces the MP cost of all your spells, so these two, Holy Spirit, Holy Circle, to 0, and makes them instant cap. So basically, the combo is sort of, you know, Holy Spirit, Holy Spirit, Holy Spirit, Holy Spirit, boom, Requiescat, Holy Spirit, Holy Spirit, Holy Spirit, or you can, you know, throw in Holy Circles in there or whatever. Now, most of the time, you're not going to be able to get that entire thing off because first 4 casts are stationary, but, you know, it's a good way. It's good to keep in mind keeping your mana on the lower side, and it's great to start out the fight with just casting Holy Spirit on people. You heal if you take any damage. You're doing damage to them at a distance. Really, really good. And this is such a short cooldown, you know, do that, boom. 3 more, you're generating 30 oath gauge, good stuff. Now your oath gauge is actually used on Confiteor, or Confetti as I like to call it. It's an instant cast on the global cooldown, 2000 potency move. Pretty strong, good burst damage. But more importantly, since it's an AoE, I'm getting ahead of myself. So it reduces the target's damage done by 10% for 10 seconds. But since it's an AoE, anyone who gets hit by that, not just the person that you're targeting, also receives that effect along with the damage. So if the melee DPS and the tank are like diving one of your members, you can just boom, hit him with Confiteor, and for 10 seconds they're going to do 10% less damage, which is really, really good. It's also great for trying to burst someone out before the healer can get a GCD heal off or something like that. It can be used both ways, for the mitigation purpose or just for trying to kill someone really fast. So Shield Bash makes a return in PvP. You have 2 charges of it. It's on a 30-second cooldown, 800 potency, and it's just a 2-second melee stun. The second to last ability here, we have Cover. It works very similar to how it works in PvP, or PvE. I get that confused so much. Obviously, as long as they're within 10 golems of you, you take all the damage that the targeted party member would have taken, you take it. But the catch that you actually then take 20% more damage than you normally would. So it's a tricky ability to use. You know, one thing to keep in mind is that since tanks can hold the most medals, If you have 200 medals and you guys are ahead, and then you cover someone and they realize it and stun you before you can Hallowed Ground or Rampart if you have it, or spam Holy Circle to heal, they can just kill you and then you just drop 200 like really easily, and then you just drop 200 medals. And I've honestly thrown games doing that before. I see someone, I'm like, oh, I gotta cover them, and then I immediately get stunned, I die, they don't have time to heal themselves or whatever the case may be, and then they die anyways, and now we've just lost like 300 medals and the game's pretty much over. So keep that in mind. I don't want to say it's like hit or miss, but it's somewhat situational, and it's, you know, just because it's like, oh, I can cover this person and take their damage, it's like, but will you die in the process? You know, sometimes it might be better to just try and CC or use confetti to mitigate. It can get a little tricky. But as I mentioned, it does pair really well with the last ability, Hallowed Ground. It's got a 90-second recast, so it doesn't have like a 7-minute cooldown like it does in PvE. And you just pop it for 5 seconds. You take no damage from pretty much everything. I'm not actually 100% sure how this interacts with melee limit breaks. It says impervious to most attacks, so that makes me think that melee limit breaks go through this, but I'm actually not 100% sure. So if anyone in the comments knows, that'd be really great. Yeah, that's kind of an overview of the kit, and now we'll put up some gameplay and kind of go into, you know, what you want to be doing as a paladin, what you want to be looking out for, and how to play the job effectively. One of the most important things to keep in mind when playing paladin is that you have a lot of mitigation in CC. Gunbreaker is the only other tank that has damage mitigation in its kit naturally. Dark Knight and Warrior only have access to Reprisal. Not to mention that Confetti is AoE mitigation, and knowing when to use it to kill someone with burst, or when to use it to save someone's life and, you know, quote unquote peel for them, is going to separate paladins in skill. On the topic of peeling, you also have two 2-second stuns just ready to go. There's so many applications for this. You can stun the healer when your team is going to burst the DPS, then go stun the DPS, or stun the other tank so they can't try and stun your team. You can interrupt casts with this, or if you really want to be annoying, interrupt those pesky warriors during their home gang inter-release combo. The quicker you are able to recognize when people are buffing themselves with things like Delirium and Battle Litany, and being able to take away time of those buff states with your stuns, it's really going to help your team. Reducing the amount of times people get to attack during these buff states is a key component of playing Paladin, and this goes for Confetti as well. Actually, as a matter of fact, Confetti just straight up negates Battle Litany. So like I mentioned before, cover is a bit tricky to use correctly. There's just a lot to consider when using it. You know, can you survive? How many medals do you have? How many medals does the enemy team have? How many medals does your team have? You know, will this person die if I don't use it? Should I CC instead? Should I save it for later? It's just kind of a lot to take in. If it's the end of the match and the next death is going to decide who has more medals and thus subsequently win the match, then, I mean, yeah, just like go ahead and use it. But if your team is only ahead by like 150 or 200 and you have 200 medals, then maybe think about saving it. You know, it feels weird to kind of like let someone die as a tank, but as long as it's like a DPS that doesn't have enough medals to drop your team into the losing position, in some scenarios, you know, emphasis on some, it actually might be the right call. As I mentioned before, this does pair well with Rampart and Hallowed, but, you know, as I stated in my tank video, I don't think Rampart is a great skill overall, and if you're only using it for when you cover, it just doesn't seem worth it enough for me in my eyes. However, Rampart does have a 60-second cooldown, Hallowed has a 90-second, so if you cover every time it comes up, then, you know, you're only like exposed, quote unquote, for every, you know, every 3 covers. You know, you're not going to be obviously using cover every single time it comes up, so you do actually get some value out of that combo. So in terms of what to do and how to play as a paladin, you're mostly going to be sort of jumping around from target to target, trying to set up kills and peel for your team since you have so much CC and mitigation. Your DPS should be marking with a countdown who they're going to attack, so try to line up your CDs with that. It can be tricky managing your mana to make sure it's low enough to get Requie, you know, when Requie comes up to get the extra potency, but, you know, don't be afraid to use it at full mana if you need to move and hit someone or move and heal. It's also a great tool to kind of squeeze in off GCD just to get some extra damage in to burst someone. You can probably see in the gameplay that I put up, I like to start the round by casting a Holy Spirit or 2 at the DPS or something as our teams sort of meet in the middle to get my mana a little bit lower and just put some early damage out. Just don't get too distracted trying to be at 0 mana every time Requie's up, because, you know, and then not peel, because that'll definitely not bode well for your team. At the end of the day, your job is to protect more than to attack. So if things don't line up perfectly for you to get your maximum DPS, because you have to turn around and stun someone or whatever, like, it's okay. You know, that's what the DPS are for. That's not to say that Paladin doesn't do damage or can't do damage. It does plenty. You know, it's just different from Warrior or Gunbreaker that sort of have these like big burst windows where they're able to drop people from, you know, 100 pretty much almost to 0 or get in that range. Another thing you'll see me doing this footage is my healer is getting dove by the enemy warrior. And even though I don't actually have any CC up at the time, I went back and just started attacking the warrior just to put damage on him. So that way, if he wants to heal, he has to run back to where his team is and where his healer is. And that subsequently gets the warrior off my healer and kind of frees them up. Then I go back and I jump back to the DPS once the warrior's laid off. And that's kind of like the dance of jumping back and forth that I found with Paladin that works. So in terms of additional actions for Paladin, Full Swing is great for more burst potential. If you want more CC, then obviously go for Low Blow, and if you want more damage mitigation, go for Reprisal. Those are kind of the big three. You know, even though you have Confetti, I find Reprisal to still be very useful. Some people like to cover their weaknesses, other people like to cover add to their strengths, excuse me. I obviously like to add to my strengths. I don't think Interject is that great since you already have 2 stuns, and I just don't think it's that great of an ability. Anyways, I typically run Full Swing Reprisal or Full Swing Low Blow, but I actually have found Rampart to be pretty useful in some situations, so take your pick. And that's going to be a wrap for Paladin. I hope you guys found this video helpful, and I hope it shed some light on Paladin in PvP. Next up will be Dark Knight or Gunbreaker, followed by whichever one I don't do, and then probably Warrior last again. Sorry, Warrior players. If you liked what you saw here, then feel free to drop me a like and subscribe to be updated on all my YouTube content, and be sure to check me out over on Twitch at twitch.tv/feeper7. I stream Final Fantasy XIV, obviously, raiding and PvP, as well as WoW Classic and some other odd games in the mix. There's also a link in the description. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.